welcome to my channel, Everyday with Jackie. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you'll stay. And if you're returning, it's good to see you as always. So as you can tell by the title, this video is a tag video. It's called the eyeshadow palette tag. And if I'm not mistaken, this tag was created by Ali Glines and Samantha March. So you may have already seen this tag on their channels, but if you haven't, I'm doing it for myself. So if you have not already, paused the video and hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you'll know each and every time that I upload a video, I'm just going to go ahead and give you a few seconds to do so. All right, thank you for subscribing. Now, let's go ahead and jump into this tag video and see my palettes. Okay, so I forgot to mention that I was tagged by Juvia with Accessorize Your Life. So if you want to hear how she responded to this tag video, I will have her channel linked in my description. Well, not linked because I don't have any links, but it'll be listed in my description box. So, number one, show your newest palette. Well, my newest palette has not arrived yet. It will be here on Wednesday, and I might have to take a sick day to be here when it gets here. So that palette is Pat McGrath Labs Mothership 8 Divine Rose 2 palette. That is my newest palette that I purchased. But if we want to talk about palettes that I physically have in my possession, then I will have that video linked above. And it's my last haul video before my no-buy. So my latest palettes that I purchased are the Berries by Juviasplace. I picked this up at Sephora. Here it is again. And at the same time, I picked up this Cutie palette by Nabla Cosmetics. It's called the Wild Berry palette. And you already know I have to be careful with this palette because it's already falling apart. One of the shades has already popped out. So I did call them yesterday to let them know I would be returning it. But this is what it looks like. And I'm so afraid to tilt it up any higher because I don't want this shade right here to fall out again. So again, I purchased both of these palettes at the same time. So these, I would say, are my newest palettes. And number two, it says show your oldest palette. Now for that question, there is a tie because I bought both of these palettes at the same time and they're my oldest palettes that I have. And they are the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. Just keep it so the brush doesn't fall out. So here it is. And I also, while I was at Sephora picking up this palette, I also purchased the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. I'll just take the brush out of this one. So both of these palettes are my oldest palettes. Well, you know, I haven't been in the game that long anyway, so this may be new to some of y'all. And number three, show your most expensive palette. Again, my most expensive palette would be the Pat McGrath Labs Mothership 8, the Divine Rose 2. But since I don't have that one here in my possession, my most expensive palette would have to be the Natasha Denona Lila palette. Or Layla palette. I've heard someone pronounce it a different one. I say Lila. And this is what that palette looks like. And at the same time where I picked this one up, I also picked up the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. And I got both of these at Sephora, and they were having a sale on both of these palettes, and I paid like 80 something dollars. And you know, Natasha Denona's palettes usually, I think, are like 120. So they were having them for $80, and I picked both of these up at the same time. Okay, and so next it says, show your most affordable palette. And that is easy. It would be the Bad Habit Pretty Poison palette. Got this on Shop Hush. And this is what it looks like. This kind of looks just like the, doesn't this look just like or similar to the Lila palette? I think this is a pretty close dupe. So again, this is my most affordable palette, because with Shop Hush you were able to accumulate points, and I had enough points where I think I paid $3 or $5 for this palette. So this is my most affordable palette. And the next one is show your everyday palette. So that was a little tricky. So for me, I would say this palette here, this is the Tarte palette, and it's called the Unleashed palette. And I think these shades are very everyday friendly. And when I first started my channel, I was hitting this palette hard. I know people got tired of seeing it. And so, you know, this is really a warm and cool tone palette. And I just used this every day as I was getting ready to go to work. I use this palette so much. And I do work in the office, and I thought this was a perfect palette for my job in the office. It was just an everyday palette with just a pop of color here. But I use this palette to death. So I would say this is, oh, I just got a whiff. It smells like chocolate. I would say that would be my everyday palette. And the next question, or the next number, what number are we on? 6. Question number 6 says, show your most colorful palette. And for that, I would have to bring out my Color Story palette, the Bright Blooming Pressed Pigment palette. And I just did a look with this palette a few videos back, and I'll also have this one linked in the cards. And I picked this one up from Target, and this is what this palette looks like. So yes, this is my most colorful palette without a doubt. It's so pretty. Oh, I actually have this palette on my eyes today. I went in with this blue in the inner corner. This shade I just put on the lid, and I think it was this shade I put above my crease. So this is my most colorful palette. And next it says, show your smallest palette. And here she is. This is my Viseart Dark Edit palette. This, as you can tell, is my smallest palette. And this is what it looks like. So pretty. She's small, but it is a gorgeous palette. So this little bite-sized palette is my smallest palette so far for a long time. And next it says, show your biggest palette. So I would have to say that this palette is my biggest palette by Morphe. And this is the, what is this? The 39A Dare to Create palette. And I picked this up a few years back. Doesn't have a mirror. But I picked this up a few years back at Christmas time. And since then they've re-released it, but I don't know if it's available still. But this is my biggest palette by Morphe. It's beautiful. I haven't used this palette in a long time. It's so pretty. Okay, the next one says, show your best memory palette. So my best memory palette would be the Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam palette. And the reason I say that this is my best memory palette is because my sister brought me this palette on my birthday. So I was like, no, it costs too much money. That's okay, knowing that I wanted it all along. And she was like, don't worry about it, I'll get it. And the funny story is that I had seen everyone using this palette on the YT when it first released. So, you know, I wanted it too. And so my sister got it for me. And when I got it home, I was still new in the makeup game. So when I got it home, I thought, you know, I should be able to create looks like I've been seeing on YouTube, and I could not. So little does my sister know, I tried to take this palette back and they would not take it back. And I hadn't even used it that much, but because she bought it under her name, they wouldn't let me take it back. So turns out that I'm glad that they didn't, because as you can see, once I learned how to use it, I went to town on this palette. So I'm so glad they didn't take it back, and I'm glad that I still have it. And this is my best memory palette, my birthday gift from my sister. And my next one is, show your palette that's not worth the hype. The palette to me that is not worth the hype, and I'm kind of sorry that I purchased it, is this one. This is the Urban Decay Elements palette. I was seeing it all on the YT. YouTube will suck you into anything. So I was seeing everyone use it, but oddly enough, a lot of people were decluttering this, but it didn't sink in. So I picked it up anyway. And I just don't really use this palette. I don't really like a lot of the shades in the palette. I'm not sure. I think this blue is gorgeous, and so is this one. But as far as the rest of the shades, I really don't care for this palette. I've got to bust it out though and try to create some looks with it just so it's not sitting there. But I have hardly used this palette at all. This is my palette that I feel is not worth the hype. And only 2 more questions to go. Show your favorite palette from a favorite brand. Now this is a little mini palette, but I do love it. I do love it. So I would say my favorite palette is the Natasha Denona Cranberry palette. It's just a small one, but I love this palette. So this is it. I have used this. I have a look on my channel with it a long time ago. But you know, the thing about it is, like, I do so many Shop My Stash videos that I hardly get to play in these because I try not to overwhelm myself with too many palettes in my Shop My Stash. So for the month of June, I'm not doing a Shop My Stash, so I am going to be playing in all kinds of palettes. So this is my favorite palette from a favorite brand. I really like this palette a lot. And the last question, or the last one that we're going to talk about, it says, show your most used palette. So this was kind of tricky for me because I don't really use this palette all that much anymore. But when I got it, and I will say still going forward, with all the palettes that I have, that this would still have to be the one that I use the most, even though I don't use it quite as much anymore. But it would have to be the Nubian palette by Juviasplace. And I say that this is my most used palette because I think this is the only palette that I have where I really have some divots going in the eyeshadow pans. So I use this quite a bit. And this, again, was one of these palettes that was perfect for work I would just grab this. I would even take this to work with me some days that I didn't have time. Like if I woke up late and didn't have time to do my eyeshadow, I would take this palette to work with me. It's small enough to do that. And it's just an everyday palette. So this, I would say, is my most used palette. I have divots in this shade, this shade, this shade. I mean, I used to hit this palette hard. And you can create everyday looks. You can spice it up and create a little bit more of a glam look with this palette. So this definitely would have to be my most used palette. I'm just looking, I got divots in this one. I used to use this to death. So this was my most used palette. Even though I don't play with it that often anymore, I still like it. And who knows, this month I may get a chance to play with it a little bit more. So those are all the, not really questions, but I'm just going to say questions. These are all the questions in the eyeshadow palette tag. So if you have any of these palettes that I held up and I talked about, you'll have to let me know below. Also, if you're interested in doing this tag, please feel free. I'm not going to tag anyone because I don't want you to have that pressure. But if you want to do it, then go ahead and help yourself. And I will watch your tag and see if we have any of these palettes in common. So that does complete today's video. If you like these types of videos, please go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you'll know each and every time that I upload a video. And please go ahead and share the channel because you know I don't mind. And lastly, please know that you're always welcomed and wanted here on my channel. And with that said, everyone have a wonderful evening and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye.